in a society that is what's the word? Can't always get the right word. What word do you use when it's
in a repressive society?
Repressive, of course, and stifling. Not stifling, but there's another better word. Where there is no stimulation for anything. What's that word?
In a monotonous society?
No. Stagnated.
In a stagnated.
In a society that is completely stagnated spiritually, it is an impossibility for an individual to develop freely. You can develop to a certain degree, but it will always be a deformed development somehow, rather than a normal, free one. You never become yourself, really. You have to lie all the time. I mean, that life really destroys your soul, as you just said. Whatever you have inside will be destroyed. In the end, you're ruined, really. It's very hard to remain yourself, sane and free spiritually. So how could I say I would develop in the same way? I'm absolutely convinced 100, 200% that I could not have developed in the same way had I stayed in Russia. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, there's no doubt that the extensiveness of your career could never have happened quite like it has.
No,
there.
of course not. That's simply in a physical sense. Of course not. It's impossible. But even more important in the spiritual sense. I couldn't have become a person I am now.
Yeah. Of course, the piano in Russia is an important instrument, and there's always talk of a Russian school of piano playing. Is there any debt to that?
I don't really know. Whenever people ask me this, I only can say that I don't know enough. You see, I'm not so much in the teaching world, students and teachers and conservatories. Once I graduated from mine, that was it. I almost never taught. There are a few students I listened to and gave some suggestions, but I'm not very much in it. I'm not interested so much in this. You know, perhaps there are some differences, maybe superficial only. Perhaps there's some deeper differences, but in the end I believe that the individual is of the utmost importance. You know, the individual teacher or the individual pupil. Also, the extent of communications now is so great that, you know, you can have any records or any advice from any part of the world you need, really.
Yeah.
So by now I don't really even know if there is such a thing as a specifically Russian school. I know that in the Moscow Conservatory they prepare students very well, technically, you know. But that again is very much part of the system, because the accent is made on winning international competitions, you know, by the Soviet system. And they pressurize very much all the conservatories to prepare prize winners. Now, if you need prize winners, you have to prepare very good technicians. So good technicians are prepared in the Soviet Union. It's very simple. Other than that, I don't know, there are just as few really great performers as there anywhere else, you know.
They're obsessed with a kind of status, a desire for status.
That's right.
They? Yeah.
Yes, it's all very artificial.
This is a more general question. Do you think that most piano aspirants have any real idea what professionalism it takes to have a sustaining career? I mean, it seems like a rugged life in all ways, from the touring into the constant learning. People dream of fantasies of being a concert pianist or violinist.
And they don't know what it entails. Well, I suppose when you're a child, you don't know what life has in store for you. So you can hardly blame a child for not knowing what a piano career or any other career entails for him.
But often
or
it's
her.
perpetuated at the schools, too, that, you know, if they work hard, they will become another Vladimir Ashkenazy or Horowitz, and they, too, will lead a glamorous life and play with orchestras.
What is worse, I think, is that the lay audience, I mean, people who are not in music, mostly don't really know what it means to be a musician or a dancer, for instance, or an actor, and so on. They think you have a fantastic life. You just come out on the stage and play for your pleasure, and get a lot of money. And, you're one of those few fortunate ones. They don't know that it is, in fact, slavery.
Yeah.
And this you'll find all over. You find that people don't know what it is, what kind of slavery it is. Except that to me it is sweet slavery, because I think I was born a musician. My life is in music, and I love it so much that it's not slavery for me.
Yeah.
And if it is, it's very sweet. But for some it might be not so sweet,
Audiences certainly expect from the artists, but what do you expect from an audience? Do you ever think about that?
What do I expect? I would rather say what I would like to have from the audience.
Yes, that's what I mean.
I would like a lot of concentration and silence while I play. That's all I need. What I can expect is a different story. In different countries you expect a different kind of concentration. In some Latin countries you don't expect very much concentration, unfortunately. A lot of noise. But actually I must correct myself a little bit. In the last few times that I visited Italy, I was very pleasantly surprised. I found a lot of young people in the audience, which was not the case about 10-15 years ago. And not only that, but they are very quiet, which was not the case about 10, 12, 15 years ago. I remember I couldn't stand playing in Italy because the audiences were absolutely unruled. Is that the way?
Yes.
Unruly. You could not get silence.
How interesting.
Once or twice I had to stand up before playing and say, unless you be silent, I won't begin the concert. But as I say, in the last few years, I played a few times. It was absolutely marvelous. So maybe things are changing.
Have you talked to anyone about this change, why it occurred? Maybe perhaps records have made a
I don't
dent?
know. No, I think it's a deeper change. I think that there's a deeper commitment to serious music. When young people commit themselves, they commit themselves wholeheartedly. It's not a social occasion for them. They don't go to a concert unless they really want to.
That's right.
Why this change came, I don't know. But the fact that the deep commitment produces more concentration and then physically more silence, there's no question in my mind of. You see.
We're going to begin hearing some music, and we're going to begin with your performance of the 8th Transcendental Etude of Liszt, and it's called The Wild Hunt, and the artist is my guest, Vladimir Ashkenazy. You have heard Liszt's Transcendental Etude in C minor, the 8th of his set of 12, and after these messages, we will return with more music and discussion with Vladimir Ashkenazy. Mr. Ashkenazy, we've been speaking on many subjects. Does music have a philosophical meaning for you? I mean, is there a spiritual message that as an artist you try to get across? Or is it just music is music?
I could only answer with Beethoven's words. I think Beethoven said once that music means to him more than anything, even more than philosophy itself. Whatever he meant, I would subscribe to. I don't think I could express it better than that. I see there is a lot of discussion about whether the music is a, so to speak, a tool of perception of the world. I do believe it is so, but not in a scientific sense of this statement. In other words, you couldn't put it in paragraphs how and in which way music perceives the world, and what does it in fact perceive. It is very hard to answer that, and perhaps it is impossible and not necessary. But the fact remains that it does perceive so much. I think I learned on music so much about us, about mankind, about humanity, about everything that surrounds me, that I could perhaps learn on any more than perhaps I could learn on anything else. And I don't think I could put it into words. If Beethoven couldn't put it better, I don't think I could.
Yeah. You were speaking of Beethoven, and the writer Sullivan, in a little book on Beethoven, spoke of
Right.
Beethoven's states of
Right.
consciousness,
Yes.
which is so beyond really philosophy itself or words.
Yes. It's interesting that it's my favorite book on Beethoven, and
Yeah.
perhaps not only on Beethoven, perhaps generally on music. It's one of my favorite
Wonderful.
books.
He was
It's
a
marvelous.
mathematician.
Yes, I know.
Sullivan, yeah.
I know, and it's interesting how much he understood in music and in Beethoven. And of course, Beethoven, one of the greatest geniuses. It's
Before,
amazing.
Mr. Ashkenazy, you were saying sweet slavery. You were born to be a musician, but of course it takes much to be one. I want to ask you this. Have you ever experienced a guilt just because you get to do what you want?
No.
Wonderful.
No, I'm just, I feel I'm lucky and fortunate. No, never any guilt.
Wonderful. Okay. Now, I'll ask you this. Do you feel an insensitive person can produce art? I mean, a Hitler cooed over music. You know, he adored Wagner. Stalin said, oh, I don't want to kill anything when I hear the Appassionata, that kind of thing. Yet these were killers. I mean,
I'm not sure that Hitler was insensitive. He was a monster. But, I mean, he was a deformed and deranged person. But there could be an area of sensitivity in that monster too. You see,
Yeah.
I mean, a person's mind is another world.
Yeah.
He could kill and at the same time feel some very refined feelings. You know, one goes with the other. Unfortunately, I suppose he could be a decent artist. I know he painted or something, aquarelles or something, watercolors. They could be, decent. I don't know if he was a genius in painting. I don't think he was.
I doubt it.
But he was probably all right. I couldn't make such good watercolors as he did, if they were really his, because it's hard to establish the
So these are
authenticity.
all such complexities here.
I think, yes, I think it's too complex to describe.
You were talking a minute ago about different audiences. Do you have different halls that you like, different countries especially that stimulate you? This Carnegie Hall, which you're playing soon.
I think Carnegie is such a good place that it helps you to play. I don't know if it stimulates me particularly. It's not that. I think it helps me to play better, sort of, The stimulation has to come from within, from yourself, from the music you play.
It always has to, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, otherwise you're dead.
Now, I'll ask you this, and you probably won't like the question because I'll ask you this anyway. Do you have any specially favorite recordings of your own work?
Not really.
Not
no.
really. What does that mean? That it doesn't come up to your expectation, many of them, or that you just, once they're made, they're not interesting to you any longer, or what?
Of course, they're interesting as pieces of music, but as performances that I have just completed, they no longer interest me. What can I do once it's done and I've approved of it? There's nothing I can do, so why should I listen to that? I listen to them only if I decide to remake some piece, to re-record some piece. Then it is a rather instructive and interesting and kind of curiosity satisfied to listen to what you did with the piece some years ago. Other than that, there's no point for me listening to my performances. And also, you know, when so much time has been spent on playing the piece and recording it on a certain day or several days, it is very difficult when you listen to many playbacks, many versions, and choose the best. You become sort of numb to this particular record. You don't anymore know what's good, what's not, and you have to live without it for some time.
I understand. Do you like making records?
Yes, I do. I like the process. I like the challenge. Trying to do your best.
Are you ever in the editing, the actual ending of when they're splicing or putting a part together, or?
No, I don't. I'm never present there, but it is my last word. What I want to do, the piece, and I check everything. I don't leave anything to the producer in the end.
I see. Now, do you listen to records of other musicians?
Yes, of course. I'm very interested in what people do with music.
What were the records growing up in Russia? Was, let's say, Horowitz an idol to you?
I think he was for a while when I was a teenager, for the sheer piano playing. But then I was very much interested, as a pianist, I was very much interested in commanding the instrument, commanding the keyboard at that time when I was very young. And it seemed to me that he had that kind of a devilish gift of commanding the keyboard. Maybe not perfectly. I don't think he ever was a perfect pianist, but he was unbelievably exciting, demonic pianist, which was very impressive at that age.
Well, he impressed many pianists. Many times they imitated him too much. So many have.
Yes. I think even I for a month or two tried to imitate him, but I couldn't, because my equipment was of entirely different nature, and I suppose my inner requirements were of a different nature, so I could never imitate him, and I never tried on stage in any case.
We're going to interrupt our conversation because we're going to now listen to your performance of not a Schubert sonata, we don't have time, but the 3 minute and 20 seconds of very beautiful piece called Hungarian Melody in B minor of Schubert. Vladimir Ashkenazy, the artist. You have just heard Schubert's Hungarian Melody, and it was played by Vladimir Ashkenazy. Right after these messages, we'll be back with more words with my guest. This is David Dubal, and my guest today and last week, Vladimir Ashkenazy. On your program at Carnegie Hall, Mr. Ashkenazy, on April 24th, you are playing Scriabin. Now, I'll ask you a couple of questions on him. Scriabin is still new to many audiences, especially in the West. What does he represent to you? How would you compare him, let's say, to Rachmaninoff's pianism? And what generally do you think his place in the piano literature is?
Oh boy, you don't have that much time for me to talk about Scriabin.
A few sentences.
To say a few words. To say a few words is almost unfair because you have to explain a lot about Scriabin. He was a kind of amateur philosopher. He had his own world. He believed in transforming the world through music and so on. So he was in touch with the spiritualists and what are they called?
Theosophists?
Theosophists,
yes.
That's it, Theosophists. And he learned about different states of the spirit and so on, of which I don't know enough. I'm only describing what he did. And in his music there are also distinctly different descriptions. They're distinct descriptions of different states of the mind and of the spirit. And if you know about those, it will facilitate to interpret his music or to listen to his music. There's a languid state and a state of activity, then the state of elevation of the spirit, and then the final merging of the spirit with the universal spirit. But this is words, but the music that describes those states, and it's a very organic description. So it isn't just a kind of a programmatic, superficial description. The music is very idiomatic and very impressive on musical terms as well. Well, that's all I could say in a few words.
What about difficulty? Is he as difficult for the hand as Rachmaninoff, let's say?
Technically, pianistically, I mean, well, those states of the mind when he begins to take off, to try to fly, sort of. Those are pianistically very difficult because he tends to sort of use all the keyboard and jump from place to place. Oh, naturally, if you want to fly, you have to jump,
That's right.
And that's rather difficult pianistically. But if you get the right sound, the right feeling, somehow you can manage.
Now, is he really well known in Russia, as we get the impression that he is like a great national composer?
I think that one should say that he is very much part of Russian musical heritage. And of course, any musician will know a lot of Scriabin. But I think basically the audiences will know Scriabin in Russia, those who go to concerts regularly. But you couldn't say that Scriabin is a household word in Russia as Tchaikovsky is. I mean, talking about Russian composers like Tchaikovsky's or Mussorgsky or Rachmaninoff, that's not the case. His music is a bit removed from quick accessibility. You see.
Did you come to him in Russia, or did you start learning most of it in the West?
Oh, I knew a lot of his music in Russia. Very, very much, of course, especially his orchestral music. And of course a lot of piano music, but especially orchestral music.
I can see you conducting the Prometheus or Poem of Ecstasy sometime.
I've done the Ecstasy already. I enjoyed it tremendously. It's not difficult for me somehow.
Did you know the playing in Russia of Vladimir Sofronitsky?
Yes, I heard him a few times.
He played Scriabin.
Yes, and I have quite a few of his records of Scriabin's music. I think he was a wonderful interpreter of Scriabin.
Wonderful feeling.
Really, really, yes, marvelous.
He was never here in the West. He died, I think, around 1961.
Yes, he wasn't such a great instrumentalist. You see, he had great problems playing the instrument. It was very hard physically for him. But he somehow managed it.
Yes,
to
he managed, and he had a
infuse-
certain possessed feeling at times. It really comes off.
That's right, absolutely.
And the languid
Communicate.
part, I think, is just wonderful.
Absolutely, that's true, yes.
Yeah. We're going to, you're playing on the 24th, Saturday. You're playing in your program the Sixth Sonata and some very characteristic near later pieces of Scriabin. And if you don't know Scriabin, this is a wonderful process here that you're going through, because there's, I would call it what, the middle period Scriabin?
Yes, it is middle to late.
Yeah. And we're going to hear you play the two dances, Opus 73, on your recording, your London record, which is late. And here you have the languid and the almost, he was, the guirlande, garlands. And then the next piece is Somber Flame. And here you have this flight. He was so fascinated by flame.
Yes, those were evil forces.
Yes,
you
evil
see.
forces.
He had those too.
He was wonderfully insane in certain ways.
Yes,
A
deliciously, decadently insane. Yes,
a messianic personality, and he would compose the Ninth Sonata, and he'd say, he thought he was purified, and all of a sudden the evil came back into him.
Right.
So he had a lot of problems, but I don't know how he got it down on paper, but it's all there. That's what's a wonderful thing.
Fascinating.
Let's hear two pieces played by my guest, the great pianist Vladimir Ashkenazy, Garlands and Somber Flames. You have just heard two pieces of Scriabin, Opus 73, in the hands of Vladimir Ashkenazy, and right after these messages we will return with our last part of our discussion and more music. This is David Dubal, and my guest in these last two programs, Ben Ashkenazy himself. If you had a chance, Mr. Ashkenazy, to hear 4 or 5 musicians of the past, just in a dream, whatever, or they discovered the LPs of so-and-so from the past, who might they be?
I certainly would like to hear Beethoven play.
Uh-huh.
And then Bach would be very interesting to hear him play.
How, on the organ or on the harpsichord? Or
Both, I think, if possible, if you give me the option. Well, perhaps if I had to choose one, I perhaps would choose the harpsichord because that's more related to my instrument. Who else? Well, Rachmaninoff, of course, I shouldn't say because there are recordings. One
that
already
doesn't
has
count.
something. Yes, that doesn't count.
Chopin, perhaps?
Chopin would be very interesting, of course. And
Liszt?
Liszt would be very interesting. He was a fantastic virtuoso. He must have been. And it would be interesting to compare him with the present-day virtuosos. Well, there are some people. Paganini would be very interesting to hear.
Very. Are there certain composers that early attracted you more than they do now? Or do you usually stick with what you had loved?
I think, yes, I've stuck with what I've loved, even at a very early stage of my life. The difference is probably of the quality. I think now I can relate better. It's more in perspective. Before I had sort of crazes, had a crush on Tchaikovsky, I had a crush on Rachmaninoff or Scriabin or Beethoven or Brahms. And now it's all kind of in perspective. But I never lost my loves. They always remained there.
No, you still play Rachmaninoff? You still play Prokofiev?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. What composers do you think, generally speaking, get the worst performances? Have you ever thought of that?
No, I've never thought of that.
I always think Chopin gets many bad performances.
Oh, well, Chopin is very accessible, so more people would think that they can easily play Chopin. Maybe that's the answer. But I think everyone gets lousy performers. All you need is a lousy performer, that's all. And plenty of those,
Now, do you ever think of immortality, your place in the world of music? I mean,
no,
you just...
Absolutely disinterested.
All right, I'll ask you a terrible question. Do you ever get depressed? Do you ever have self-doubts? Do you ever think we're living in the Dark Ages?
Dark Ages. I think the Dark Ages have never ceased. I think mankind has always been and is in Dark Ages. It's because of human nature. Depressions and self-doubts, yes, that's a constant recapitulation of those, every few weeks or every few months. But that's unavoidable, I suppose.
Is Rachmaninoff Third Concerto the ultimate in technical stress? For pianists in the audience.
One of those. Oh, yes.
You always keep it in your fingers as a...
No, I don't need it. I don't need to keep it in my fingers. I can play it within a couple of days. I haven't played it for some years, but I could play it within a few days. Because I learned it depends on how well you learned it to start with, and I learned it so well.
Wow.
So I can really play it within a few days.
That was something important to learn when you learned it.
I suppose, yes. It must have been a state of mind.
Now, I ask you this. You play over 100 concerts a year, right?
Right.
How do you physically do this? I mean, you were recording all week. Do you still live in Iceland? Do you travel worldwide now with the conducting and the piano? I mean, do you have now more concerts than ever?
No, I have over 100 concerts a year, both conducting and playing. I conduct about a quarter of my time, I think. We live in Switzerland now, not in Iceland, which makes it much easier to communicate. So that's why we moved into the Central Europe.
What about jet lag and things like that? I mean...
those are never pleasant, and they never become any easier. As you grow older, if anything, it's more difficult to deal with. But you have to allow some time to rest after a long flight.
Do you ever get to do certain exercises, yoga, sports? Do you love certain foods that maybe regenerate you, or
no.
sushi?
I love sushi, but no, I don't have a special craze for certain foods. My only requirement is the food should be good, of good quality. You see, I don't eat very much, but I try to eat very good and nutritious food. I'm not fat, so I have no problems with that, and I watch it. Of course, I don't want to become fat. As for you said something else.
I was thinking of sports or any kind of
Sports, yes.
activity.
I have no time for sports, unfortunately, but you mustn't forget that conducting is a very good physical exercise, keep you in shape. It's tremendous, in fact.
Wonderful.
And the other thing is that I do a couple of short exercises every morning. I have an expander, and I do some exercises for the stomach muscles. Not long, but it still is something.
Now I'll ask you this. Did you ever have any secret fantasy other than being a musician, even though you were born to it? For instance, an opera singer, a polo player, a baseball player, I don't know.
No. I remember when I was a teenager, I liked to play soccer, and I enjoyed watching soccer very much. I probably had a teenage fantasy of being a soccer player, but I can't now remember whether I did or not. I only think I probably had it. I liked mathematics very much, but I don't think I ever thought I would become a mathematician.
Music all the way.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think it was music always.
I'll ask you this. Did you know Shostakovich, and do you have any thoughts on that controversial memoirs?
I don't think there's a controversy. I think you started talking about the controversy only because the Soviet authorities said that this was a fake.
I see.
And if they hadn't said anything, it would never come into your mind that it was a controversy, right?
What a book.
Yes. I can't say because I never was close to Shostakovich, so I can't say with 100% certainty that every word there is definitely as Shostakovich said or thought. To me, as an outside reader and as a person who lived in Russia and who met Shostakovich a few times and knows the musical and social and otherwise climate in Russia, I would have thought that this is pretty close to the truth, if not the entire truth. It sounds very much as Shostakovich would have said several things to me.
What a bleak book.
Oh yes, oh yes. What is interesting that I don't know what Maxim Shostakovich thinks about this book right now, because he was under pressure when he was in the Soviet Union to say certain things about the book. I don't know what he's saying now while in the West. But what is interesting that I read in one of the papers that he said recently that he remembers that his father wept twice. Once, I think, when one of his wife or his mother died, can't remember what it was, and the second time when he had to join the Communist Party, and that says everything, you know. What a terrible life he must have had, very difficult life. When the news came of his death, I remember my father told me on the phone, Shostakovich died. My first word was, oh, what a hard life he had. That's all I thought about. I think it's a very truthful book.
The book is a testimony of a hard life.
Oh, that is for sure, yes. If there's some discrepancies, I'm not aware of those. It sounds true to me.
I'll ask you this question as we're ending our program shortly. Of the pianists of the past, we have asked you about the fantasies of hearing Liszt and Chopin and so forth, but records, let's say, of Hoffman, of Rachmaninoff, of Courtauld, of Schnabel, of Arthur Rubinstein, what were these people to you? You especially love Courtauld or Hoffman or Rachmaninoff?
I liked Rachmaninoff very much. I thought of that generation and of that style of playing, which you don't hear nowadays really, that was the most noble kind of playing, most expressive too, and had the most stature. I enjoyed others much less, I must admit. And even Rachmaninoff today sounds often affected and
what is this
pretty,
thing called performance change? How interesting that that each generation views that text differently.
I think we distort music much less now, it seems to me. And that generation, I think, distorted it much more. In simple terms, it's that.
What about the conductors, Bruno Walter, Toscanini, Furtwängler? Did they have any influence on your conducting? Or who did?
Well, I don't separate conducting and piano playing. It's all music, you see. Since I have never seen them conduct, I couldn't say that their manual technique ever had any influence on me. I could talk of conducting influence only in a physical sense, of seeing what a conductor does with his hands, the way he indicates something, when he brings something in the orchestra. That I could talk about. Otherwise, it is a musical question. And certain conductors also belong to another world, another era, and another way of music making, and there are certain distortions in the work of some conductors of that generation that also upset me, and I would never be a part of that kind of music making. But some performances I enjoy very much of the past also.
Yeah. Well, we are going to hear you now in a showpiece, very different from the late Scriabin you just played, and we're going to listen to you in conducting the Philharmonia Orchestra in Finlandia. And you said it was a fast performance, but do you like it?
I enjoyed it very much. I believe in it.
Okay.
I believe it should be quite fast. It propels the
It's almost
spirit.
like the national anthem of that country.
Well, the anthem is there, of course, but when there is fast music, I think it should be fast and stubborn and relentless. That's why I did it fast.
We're going to hear the relentless performance of Finlandia and the conductor, Vladimir Ashkenazy. Philharmonia Orchestra, right?
Yes.
Here it is. You have just heard Finlandia by Sibelius, of course. And we didn't mention him last time. And the Orchestra Philharmonia, the conductor, Vladimir Ashkenazy, who is going to play Saturday the 24th, 3 pieces from Opus 51 Scriabin. I'll read this and bore you, Mr. Ashkenazy, but everyone should know it. The 6th Sonata, 3 pieces from Opus 56. So there'll be a lot of Scriabin, and Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit, Ondine, Le Jabet, and Scarbo, and the pictures at an exhibition. I thank you very much for coming to talk to me. I was delighted having you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
This is David Dubal, and thank you for listening.
For the Love of Music, with today's host, David Dubal, WNCN Music Director. We hope you'll be with us when once again we meet to listen and exchange ideas, all for the love of music. For the Love of Music is produced by WNCN New York, GAF Broadcasting Company.